And next up, we've got our Increasing Your Impact workshop, which will focus on creating a winning elevator pitch. And now, if you don't know that, it's all right. We have the workshop for that. And for this workshop, we want to welcome Rania Hashim as our next speaker. So, Rania is a 14-year-old innovator at the Knowledge Society. She's motivated by her vision of a cleaner and fairer future, and she's now making this a reality by learning, communicating, and developing emerging technologies like cellular agriculture and biotechnology. Rania has done a lot of projects and worked with several companies in the alt protein space and in artificial intelligence and user experience. And now she's also working on neurotech. So let's all welcome Rania Hashim to the
Thank you so much. So, hi everyone. Today I'm going to be helping you get people to believe in you or your project through an elevator pitch. Now, first, let's see why this is important. So, let's say you and your team have built a promising solution to make pizza boxes fit in the refrigerator because that's clearly what the world needs at this point. Now, you've been selected to pitch this to a team of investors, convince them that your problem is big enough and the solution is solving it well enough. Now, this is not a simple task, but it remains one of the most important. Why, you ask? Well, your pitch is going to make or break your product in front of people. And this is extremely important, especially if your solution or project requires community involvement. You want people to think that your solution is worth looking into, which will help your project advance further. Now, a good pitch does your project justice, and that statement may induce a lot of pressure. But fear not, because I'm here to help you with the art of crafting a perfect elevator pitch. There is going to be a little twist to this scenario, though. But before that, it's time for introductions. So I think Rima did an amazing job at my introduction, but to start off again, I'm Rania Hashim and I go by the pronouns she, her. And I'm a high school student who's innovating against the world's biggest problems like gender inequality, the broken food system, and so on by learning about emerging technologies like cellular agriculture. I've researched the future of food extensively and I'm communicating my project and its impact, and I also strongly believe in challenging the status quo. Anyway, enough about me. Let's get on with the workshop. So, earlier I mentioned about a typical pitch and how important it is. Now, let's get to the twist. So, taking it a step higher, and imagine that you only have 30 seconds the time of one elevator ride to deliver it. This sounds like a pretty hard task, but this is exactly what an elevator pitch is. It's called so because you were able to deliver it in an elevator ride. Now, in an elevator pitch, you have a very short amount of time, about 20 to 30 seconds, and you want to be able to filter through the information and mention only the most valuable ones. And that's again what I'm here to help you with, crafting your elevator pitch. So I have split this whole process up into a 5-step process, which I find is the most effective for my pitches. The first step is to identify what you want to get out of this. So, there are actually two types of elevator pitches. One that you do for yourself, which is related, as you can see, to your career, ideas, skills, and so on. And the next one is for your project, which is related to the type of, the problem that you're trying to solve. You have to talk about like its impact and so on. Now, the elevator pitch for yourself comes pretty handy when you're introducing yourself in like a networking event or to your new colleagues or so on. Whereas the elevator pitch for the project, which is actually my main focus here because I want to help you communicate your innovations, is useful when you're in an industry specific conference or an event where you'll be meeting a lot of people within your space. So, an elevator pitch for yourself should give a person a gist of your skills, abilities, and experience. And the single biggest thing to focus on here is engagement. You want to engage the listener to feel that your work is important. And so you want to start with like a brief introduction. Let's say think like name, age, and title. And you want to highlight some of your best skills. So this is like the same as with the rules of descriptive writing, which I'm sure you learn in English. Instead of telling them, show them. By show, I mean try and give some examples to show how you've used these skills. For example, you want to say you are good at user experience design or user interface design. Well, you could describe or just mention a project that you did where you made a user interface and any accomplishments or achievements that you associate with it. Now let's talk about the project, which is my main focus again. So this step is actually the most important one. This is actually where we start to think about what we want to achieve with our pitch and start thinking about some very, very important questions that's going to guide it. So now take a look at this, thing. It kind of reminds me of an anatomy of an egg, but I promise you that's not the point. This is actually called the golden circle. And it's from the book Start With Why, which is exactly what this is trying to convey. So in essentially your pitch should be starting with the reason for your innovation, which is why it's at the core. So the core of your project, which is ultimately what drove you to do it, is your impact. So you need to think about the impact your innovation is having, the problem it's solving, and how it could affect the person you're pitching it to, because you want to pique their curiosity and hook their attention as well. Now you also want people like this step is a success if people actually start caring about the problem because of your explanation. Now to start off your pitch, you can just start by like writing all your thoughts. You can disregard your word limit because we'll be going over how to cut it soon. Anyway, on to the next part. So the next step relates to how. So next you want to describe how your innovation is bringing this. This is also where you want to mention your unique selling point or unique selling proposition, as there may be many people working on the same project the same problem that you're working. So you need to show why you stand across from this crowd, and you need to show that you're unique and your solution stands out. This is also really important to think about when you're, in the development stages, to see how you can be more unique than other solutions. Finally, you should describe, finally, the last layer is what. This is where you describe what your innovation is. Briefly describe its features in this step. Throughout the whole process, you want to make sure to not like clutter any of this part with buzzwords or exaggerations or random statistics, because you want to hug the attention of the listener and include the most valuable content only. Okay, so the third step is so important, it deserves a whole slide on its own. It's called the call to action or the CTA. Now, elevator rides are as short as they get, but your project ideas and interests definitely aren't. This is where the call to action comes in. So this statement is essentially designed to get an immediate response from the listener. The call to action is essentially what creates, the domino effect. So it's the finger that pushes the first domino that is actually going to bring upon a huge change. Now, these are some common examples of CTAs. Either you can give them your project website, or if it's an application, you can prompt them to install it from the App Store or so on. Now, these actually come in many forms and they depend on the deliverables and details that you have. For instance, if it's an in-person event, you would want to make sure that you have something physical like business cards to give, because then they have like a physical mark of your presence. And otherwise, like if you have developed an application, for example, you can give them the App Store, Play Store, whatever ID so that they can download it. It really depends on your project, and I believe that all of you can choose appropriately. Now, step 4 is where we cut the clutter. Now, remember how I mentioned earlier that you can just write your thoughts, let them flow, and write everything that comes to mind? This step is where we're going to be filtering it, weeding out the invaluable things. Now, the first step to shortening your pitch, which I use, is to just go through everything. Like read through the whole thing and cut out what you feel is like repeated or redundant, because you only want to retain the most valuable information. So every sentence must convey a point or play an active role in your pitch. So if you need to cut it down, use these pointers. So the first one is to cut the technical mumbo jumbo. So remember, you only have a short span of time, and you want to keep the person engaged. So depending on the person, you'd want to cut out some amount of the technical details that you have in your pitch to make sure that the important information doesn't just go through the other ear. Because trust me, that happens a lot. The second step which I use is a pretty simple hack to connect your sentences. So this gives you a pretty good flow and cuts down, the use of stop words. So you need to pause. This is a pretty good method which I use quite often. The third one is to not overuse fillers. like leading questions and side tangents. Again, just make sure what to cut what is like obvious and not valuable, like truisms and buzzwords. No fluff here because time is clearly of essence and you want to engage and inform at the perfect balance. Now, the fifth step. Some may say this is the most important step because this is where we focus on practice and delivery. Now, all the good content that you have written so far will go to waste if you don't deliver it smartly, and the best way to do this is through practice. Now, here are some pointers to help you. The first one is definitely to maintain a friendly tone and smile. This goes under delivery, and this really changes the whole set of your pitch and makes it a lot more present. Like, just think about someone coming over to you with a huge smile and inviting body language and talking to you. You will definitely notice the difference and you'll be more interested to listen as well. The second one is to speak slowly and clearly. Now, a common mistake, which I am also guilty of making, is speaking too fast. You want to make sure that the person can understand what you're saying and get the point. So make sure to do this because a lot of people make this mistake. Especially because of how short these elevator pitches are, you want to make sure that it's not too long, that you're trying to fit it all in this like tiny time space. A good tip, again, as I mentioned earlier, but I think it's still important, is to tweak your pitch depending on who you're delivering it to. For instance, if you're talking to someone who works in the space, then you want to make it more technical than you would say to someone you met at a networking event with like a lot of people from many different industries. Now, the fourth pointer is to be authentic. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is so like cliche because everyone's just like, just be you. But no one likes to hear an overly formal pitch, right? While you don't want to get too casual with unprofessional fluff, you can still maintain a friendly conversational tone. And finally, to put all these into action, practice, practice, and more practice. Do it in front of a mirror, maybe record yourself, and see what you can improve. Anyway, that's it for the pointers. I wanted to extend a huge thank you to YouthSTEM 2030 for the opportunity to conduct a workshop on this topic. And thank you for giving me a stage to present my ideas and my topic and in the process help other people. If you have any questions, excited to hear them as it's now time for Q&A. If you do have any other things, feel free to reach out to me through any of my socials. I'm always happy to share some knowledge or pointers or advice to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for listening.
Rania, that was a great presentation. You definitely taught us how to make an elevator pitch. And really, thank you for speaking to us today. If anyone has any questions, you can post them in the Q&A tab.
And while we wait for questions, I just wanted to ask you, so this entire concept of the elevator pitch, it's really based on it being impromptu. So say you run into some, I guess like big company CEO in the elevator, you don't have any preparation. What are your suggestions with an impromptu elevator pitch where you don't have any of the pre-planning that's like you would have had in other cases?
Well, like to start off, I always think it's like always good to have this whole framework embedded in your mind because typically when you like you would have prepared an elevator pitch at least once or like hopefully you must have. So I would probably just use that. But if it's impromptu, again, go with the framework. Like you probably know your project pretty well because you developed it, right? So like just think of like the impact and let the words flow. And again, timing might be a little bit of a problem, so make sure not to go into like a lot of questions or tangents because a lot of us when we get nervous we do that a lot.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And as we wait for questions, I would also like to add that pitch is really important no matter for what you're participating in. For example, even hackathons, you need to be able to say how your project is going to make a difference. You have to convince people. So that's a really important skill.
Yeah, completely agree.
I guess some questions are still coming in, but then in the meantime, just a question about you. So, I want to ask you, how did you get started in becoming a youth innovator?
Well, I was always interested in starting off, I mean like making a change. I was kind of obsessed with this idea of making an impact. But like my main my domino effect, if you were if you want to call it that, was when I joined a human accelerator program called the Knowledge Society. So the Knowledge Society is basically a 10-month accelerator, like human accelerator, which gives you which exposes you to these skill sets and mindsets and so on. And this way you have you have they give you the framework and you act on it, and then that's kind of where I figured out about like world problems, technology. So I would say joining that program and actually investing a lot of my time into it really helped me get a head start.
And then, just in general, what would your main suggestion to the people attending the summits be? Like something for them to take away.
Well, my main point, so it's really just to put yourself out there. I know I say this a little bit too much usually, but like because when you're putting yourself out there, you're technically optimizing for serendipity because you have a higher chance of being discovered. So when you're working on something or like building something, try to do like a build in public challenge or something. Like I recently tried one, it has had pretty good results. So just like update people on what you're doing, get on like LinkedIn, Twitter, but in like the good parts of it, yeah. And I think like when you really just expose yourself to all these like things, you learn a lot, but you also gain a lot from the process.
Yes, I totally agree. Networking is really important to learn more and to gain more experience. On that note, I always wondered what is the hardest part about being an innovator? What do you think would that be?
Well, personally, I also invest a lot of my time onto research. So, like sometimes this thing comes up where like I feel like I reached a dead end, and like whatever I look into, it just like contradicts whatever I found. And like this sort of thing, it's like really annoying because you have made so much progress, and you're suddenly like figuring out that like none of them make sense, or at least that's what you think at that point. But if you're thinking about like how to solve it, it would probably be just keep going because usually you would find out that your initial parts were right, or at least like some of it was right, and it can even inspire new ideas.
And just another question branching off of that. Your journey has been quite promising till now, and but still, if you could go back in time, is there anything that you would change in your journey?
Well, one thing I actually wish I found out earlier was like the value of networking because for a long time I didn't really see much point in it, which was a big mistake because a lot of the people I knew, especially in the Knowledge Society, were actually starting off with a good start, but I didn't really think of networking as that important, and I focused way too much on like building up my skill set, learning about technologies, but then if you don't have a network, a lot of that you can't really use it as well, so probably that.
And we've got actually a few viewer questions in. So the first one from Moses is, what is slash was your biggest I'm thinking this word is strength, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So what was your biggest strength?
Like generally speaking, like if you're
I,
talking like generally as an innovator, it would probably be my ability to create roadmaps for myself. So it's like for a roadmap you would need both direction and skill at the same time. So when you're talking about like direction, like you need to know where to go, because and skill sets, like you need to know what skills you need to get and a good way to figure like how to learn them. So I would say direction. So like my ability to make roadmaps for myself is my biggest strength. Yeah.
That's nice. And we've got another question. Do you have any tips for overcoming imposter syndrome and believing in the true value of your pitch?
Well, a lot of the time I do like struggle with figuring out like what is a good pitch because I don't usually have something to compare myself with. It's like in the same field and stuff. So it does it just like does get hard. But usually the best way to do it is when you like kind of try it out with people, maybe show other people, because if external, like, if external response helps, then which it does for me, because I know that my pitch is actually doing something. So that's how I usually figure it out. But I wish you luck, whoever that was.
And we have another question. You might have answered this already, but they want to know, is there anything you would have done differently if you could have done it all over again?
I think, yeah, I did kind of answer this already. The value of networking, reiterating, just put yourself out there.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. So thanks, Rania, for speaking to us today. It was lovely talking to you, hearing your presentation and the answers as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for coming. That was a really informative presentation on elevator pitches. I think everyone took away something from that. So, yeah, once again, just thank you for being able to come here and present today.
Thank you for the opportunity again.
Yeah.